Hello everyone, my name is Yana Harris. I'm a principal front-end engineer, and today I would like to talk to you about an evolution of your internal design systems through community contribution. Imagine a design system that evolves as rapidly as your business needs, continuously adapting, improving, and growing without having to solely rely on a single centralized team. What if I told you that it is possible by harnessing your internal corporate community? For those of you that work in larger organizations, most often you have a single or multiple design systems. And if you're lucky, there's a team that is constantly maintaining and supporting this design system. This team is usually the one that is responsible for putting together an agenda of which components and patterns for the design system they're going to build next. Sometimes it is based on the business demand, and sometimes it can even be based on what this team is interested in working on next. Throughout my time at Microsoft, Netflix, and now Amazon, I had witnessed time and again that harnessing internal community and allowing folks outside of a centralized system to contribute back into the design system leads to better adaptation to the business needs and allows the design system and the component library that represents it to not lag behind the product evolution. Let's explore how contribution to the Figma library, as well as code contribution by the developer community, can accelerate growth, enhance innovation, and create a more robust design system. As the design system expands, maintaining it becomes increasingly complex. New products, features, and user requirements demand the system to keep up. Instead of solely relying on a centralized team to maintain this growth, why not tap into the vast pool of talent available within your organization? Contribution into the design system really happens on two levels. First, when various designers and design team innovate, they should be encouraged to come back to the centralized design system team and contribute their patterns and new ideas so that the design system can continue growing. The more designers reuse those new and existing patterns, the more it becomes obvious that there's an opportunity for a centralized code repository. And hopefully, the development community is encouraged to contribute back new components, enhance existing ones, or optimize the code base. This approach doesn't just speed up the development, it also fosters a sense of ownership and collaboration within the company. Let's talk about how design contribution usually works. When designers from a different team identify a gap or an opportunity for improvement, they can create and submit their proposal directly in Figma. These contributions are normally then reviewed by the core system design team to ensure that they align with the core standards and principles before being integrated with the foundational design system. This approach allows for much faster iteration on existing patterns and components, as well as expand the variety of diverse solutions available within the design system. Of course, there are some risks associated with this approach. First and foremost, it is consistency, or the lack of thereof. Without a proper and reliable review process, newly submitted components and patterns might not necessarily always follow all the fundamental rules and principles. And without an efficient process of review and validation, the design system team might become overwhelmed with a large volume of contributions. So it's important to keep in mind that the design system team needs mechanisms to rely upon to make sure they don't become the bottleneck in this process. Now, let's shift our focus to the code contributions. Code contributions back to the design system and the component library can be done in two different ways. One way is to contribute directly into the core component library. This can be a new foundational component, an enhancement to an existing component, work done on other parts of the system, like design tokens. And another way to contribute is to create a community library. Let's talk about the differences. When contributing to the core code base, every developer would create a pull request or code review that then would undergo a detailed examination by the core component library team. The core team will ensure that the new contribution does not introduce any security concerns. They are responsible at the end of the day for making sure that they maintain a high quality bar for the code quality, as well as not introduce any regressions. Pros and cons when it comes to contributing back to the core component library. Let's talk about pros. Number one is consistency. For every developer who's gone through a detailed code review with a centralized maintaining team, you can be sure that their code is matching in styling and quality to this of the rest of the core component library. The other benefit is scalability. The core team will ensure that your component meets other use cases and not just the immediate use case for your product. This means that the new component contribution into the core library will benefit all teams, scaling its impact across the organization. When it comes to security and reliability, the team maintaining the core library often has a very robust CI/CD pipeline, so you can be sure that your contribution is going to go through the CI/CD pipeline And if all tests are passing, this means the code is secure, reliable, and doesn't introduce any new vulnerabilities. One more benefit of contributing back into the core library is clear ownership. Even though a third-party developer inside the organization might have contributed a brand new component, the core maintaining team is still going to be responsible for maintaining and fixing any future bugs if they arise. This is really an extremely convenient scenario for a product team when they would like to develop a sophisticated component but don't really have bandwidth or time to maintain it down the road. There are some risks and complexities associated with contributing back to the core library. Number one risk is rigidity. There are usually pretty strict rules on how you write your code if you're contributing back to the core library, and you don't often have a lot of leeway in terms of styling and approach. It can be a pretty complex endeavor if you're trying to contribute into the core library and not yet familiar with the ways that they write and structure their code. So it certainly raises the level of complexity for a contribution, especially since you might have to consider other use cases outside of your immediate product. The third negative is the fixed release cycle. Usually, with a robust component library, the release cycle can be scheduled ahead, and there might not be as much flexibility in releasing a new patch or a minor version outside of the scheduled release date. On the other hand, a product team that's interested in sharing their code outside of their immediate product can go ahead with a community library contribution. Building that community library with the core principles in mind still allows not only to rely on a recognizable pattern of building and distributing a component library, it might also help you with discoverability if you're looking for other customers to be interested in this as a dependency. A standalone community library can be an amazing place for rapid experimentation and prototyping, whereas the team that's starting this library has the most control over its release cycles, the speed with which they're choosing to move forward, code styling solutions, and approach overall. From the standpoint of the centralized design system team, it can be a great idea to provide a set of artifacts to help product teams spearhead their new community libraries. This might mean a set of boilerplate templates that ensure a reliable and consistent build setup, as well as can potentially include other rules like linting and prettier. At Amazon, we're aiming to provide not only the template for your immediate repository, but also to automate your pipeline generation. This way, a product team that is looking to share their code can save significant amount of time on bootstrapping and start producing the business logic of their component library right away. Obviously, there are benefits and drawbacks of this approach as well. Number one benefit is the flexibility. The team can innovate more rapidly and experiment with specialized components, not having to worry about too many of other use cases outside of their immediate product. The owning team usually also doesn't have to stick to a strict release schedule and can release their community library at their own cadence. In terms of governance and ownership, this is usually the sticky subject. My approach is to have the product team own this library, deployment pipeline, and the release schedule, while allowing other teams to contribute more components and improve upon existing components at the same time. This way, the contribution into this library is truly a community approach. However, you still need a DRI, or a directly responsible individual, in our use case, a team, to make sure that there is someone who is able to respond and resolve an urgent bug or security concern. There's usually also a lower barrier for entry, where a community library might have a more lightweight review process and not necessarily require every contributor to stick to a very strict coding style or approach. There are certainly some risks. Number one risk, I'm sure everybody is going to point out, is fragmentation. With community libraries, we cannot expect all of them to stick to a very high standard of the core component library. Not every developer might have the same level of experience when it comes to building for accessibility. This is where a centralized design system team can really step forward by providing automation tools that can help with scanning for accessibility concerns, for example, a color contrast tool or an area tag checker, such that developers with various backgrounds can rely on those automation tools and still do a good job of sticking to the high standard of the code quality. The second concern is maintenance and governance. While it is usually an expectation for the team that had started the library to continue maintaining it down the road, it is very important to set clear expectations of what that maintenance really means. You really don't want other teams to come and start requesting new features and new components, especially when they should really be welcome to start their own contribution. I can see how long-term maintenance can be challenging in the world of constantly shifting priorities. Concern number 3 is duplication of effort. Without proper discoverability of what's available today and what teams might be working on right now, there's always a risk that 2 different teams might be trying to build something very similar or almost exactly the same. The whole goal of community contribution back to the design system is to save effort and reserve engineering resources. And if we're building the same set of components and patterns across 2 or 3 different teams at the same time, that is certainly not saving us any engineering resources. It is extremely important to make sure that there's a clear mechanism for discoverability. To wrap up, in my mind, community contribution is an amazing tool to scale up your design system. By engaging our internal audience in both design and code contribution, we can achieve much faster growth and iteration, more innovative solutions, and a greater sense of ownership. I encourage each and everyone to think about how you can contribute to your internal design system. Remember, a design system is not just a set of rules and components, it's a living and breathing mechanism, ever evolving, that thrives on the collective input. Let's continue to build our design systems together. This is all for today, and until the next time.